Okay, we're back with the final of our podcast here through the Crime Victim Center, talking about the Tiger King documentary from Netflix and the things that we notice. I, again, am Brian Pryor, one of the prevention education specialists at the Crime Victim Center, and I'm joined again by my friend
Leslie Wagner, counselor for the Crime Victim Center.
Absolutely. And so if you've been keeping track, this is our final episode. This covers we're only going to get into the final episode of the actual documentary. If you're not familiar, there was an 8th episode that was released, but that's just sort of kind of a reunion among the people there that was hosted by a gentleman named Joel McHale. And we'll get into some of the stuff that was talked about, because one of the things, again, I wanted to mention from the idea of bystander effect, because we're all bystanders watching this documentary, is sometimes you just find out you didn't have the whole story, or that what you thought might not necessarily have been the truth. And as you can understand, if you've been following and listening to what we've been talking about, some of the people whose lives were involved in this show, there were some people who really kind of felt like the documentary didn't do them justice or didn't do the whole story. But basically, episode 7 is the trial. Joe Exotic is put on trial for dozens of counts that range anywhere from animal cruelty to animal trade to the big one that kind of gains a lot of the attention is murder for hire, hiring someone to murder Carole Baskin. That is, what the episode goes about and how it affected everybody. He's found guilty. He's facing 79 years. He gets 22. But bringing it back to, from a victim organization standpoint and things we noticed, what were your thoughts? What are some of the things you took away from the 7th episode?
With Joe, he still maintains his innocence. We see that a lot with offenders. When we deal with the victims, if we have to go to trial with a victim, and their offender will say, I didn't do this, it was somebody else, and I think with Joe, he was still in denial of what was going on in his life. He had so much turmoil between trying to fight Carole Baskin, for the Tigers and everything, and the lawsuit that she had against him. And I think he got lost on who he was fighting for. Was he fighting for himself, or was he fighting for the Tigers? And I think in the end, he just lost everything, and it got to the point where he had no other options for himself.
And I think we see that a lot of times when you see, again, kind of taking this to the general idea of, not everybody knows Joe Exotic, but we've seen unhealthy relationships, either, unfortunately being in them, and just as unfortunately as a bystander standpoint, as a family member, as a friend, acquaintance, as a coworker. I think we've all seen those people at some point where you see that the trouble is coming, they feel the trouble is coming, but it's like almost like quicksand with them. They commit to the lie, they commit to the unhealthy choice, and make series of decisions that just go further and further away from what healthy or good or beneficial for them or the relationship or the business or what have you. And just, it's almost like they obsess on that one thing, and they have to get that right before anything else can go back to right. And it's the person who lies to cover up the lie, to cover up the lie, to cover up the lie. And, big cat rescue may be something that's foreign to a lot of people, but seeing people kind of go down that list of destructive behavior, unhealthy behavior, poor choices to try to fix the one thing, or to try to go after the one thing, or take care of the one person. I think that's something that's a lot more common for a lot.
Right. People will remember the negative before they'll remember the positive about things. When Joe first started out the zoo, was he positive about the animals? Yeah, he probably was. And then it got towards, the negative part. You know, let's breed as many cats as we can. Let's really get the zoo going. So who was it really about? It was about Joe. Was he concerned anymore about the tigers and the other animals that he had there? My personal opinion, I don't think he really was. Towards, you know, as he started to be infatuated with Carole, that obsessed his life.
Yeah.
You know, he figured out social media and he just wanted to broadcast that out to everyone that would see it.
And not even, and again, getting to the point where at a certain point, he does that and he figures out, okay, I can do this social media, I can do this. At a certain point, you see that, and again, we see a lot from, you know, counseling and advocacy and education. You see it from a binary standpoint. You start seeing people go, okay, well, you got something positive here. You can do something with this. This is something that can work well for you. But then they take it and they go an unhealthy place with it. And it's like, okay, he has this chance for his reality show. Carole didn't have that. None of the other people had it. He couldn't went anywhere with that and built himself up. But what you see him do is try to use it to take somebody else.
Right.
And very common, actually.
Yeah, unfortunately, it really is. It's very common, you know, to see people like that. You know, it's all about revenge, you know. Eye for an eye, and I know I probably shouldn't make this comment on record, but the eye for a tiger, you know.
Yeah. And it's, you know? It's like I keep trying to think of like things that like I like when I was watching it, just going through, I'm like, okay, now how would I have seen like this without, you know, obviously being in the big cat industry or whatever. And the thing that I thought about, like when the technology and like looking back at what Joe could have and how he could have made that zoo work and had, you know, had a healthy relationship with the business and everything like that. At a certain point, the things and the benefits that he had that he could have done good with was just used to take down Carole. And what it's like it's somebody that gets out of a relationship with someone, gets into a new relationship, and instead of that relationship being about, okay, let me see if this person and work together and if we can have a good relationship or not, it's I got to bring this person and show them to the ex. Mm-hmm. So where the ex and her new boyfriend hang out, or where his new girlfriend hangs out, and they need to see that what I got and what I'm doing, and that's not healthy. You can really truly have a good and full healthy relationship with someone if the reason why you're with them is get back or spite the previous relationship.
Right. You know, you mentioned technology and it made me think of something. Okay, so in the earlier episodes, there was the big fire, you know, all of Joe's computer stuff, his documents were burned up. But in episode 7, it caught my eye. Dylan is going to a storage unit full of documentation and hard drives and stuff. Where did all that come from?
Yeah.
After the fire, or was it before the fire?
My belief, from what I could tell, and again, this is the burden of the bystander, is I can only go by the story I was told. You know, if you've ever been in a situation where someone in a relationship, a partnership, a friendship, a dating relationship, family, they come to you and go, well, why would you say this? Why do you think this? And you got to go, well, I was told. I can only go by what I was told. And so the documentarian is telling us the story. Like I said, we're in a relationship with the documentarian, and as the timeline and the chronology of what we were shown would lead me to believe is that was all stuff after the rebuild. Because apparently what it is, and even at one point, whoever is there with Dylan, one of Dylan's friends is like, oh, look at this. And he's like, no, don't show that. That's bad. That's bad. Because it shows that Joe is selling, like breeding and selling cubs, which he got locked up for. There's the evidence that proves he did it. So if you think Joe is completely innocent, sorry, Dylan just showed that he's not. but it was the thing that showed that he sold some to Doc Antle, and then they immediately go to that. Well, I think, at least in the way they showed the documentary, was after the fire, that was right around the time when, after the lawsuit, Joe just had to find money any way he could. And
Right.
the big breed and sell and the cub petting and everything like that. So my guess is those were all things that he didn't like take out of the shed, burn it down, and then just keep this. It was stuff that was afterwards. But again, I'm just, from a legal standpoint, I'm going, all burned down. You clearly, whether you had something to do with it or not, it benefited you. All these hard drives and these records you're keeping, you clearly haven't learned your lesson.
Right. Right.
He's a bad criminal, and by a bad criminal, I mean he's not good at it.
Yes.
It's bad and horrible what he's done, and he's not good at it either.
Right. Right.
But I think one of the other things that I just kind of wanted to get into in the idea was the narcissism that you brought up right from the beginning when we're talking about unhealthy relationships and narcissism. And I think it's important to understand that narcissism is not just a male thing. It's just a person thing. It's somebody that clearly only thinks about themselves and for whatever reason can only approach situations from how it'll benefit themselves. Egotistical. And we see that again in episode 7, because Joe, regardless of what you believe, or if he was done in or set up by Jeff Lowe, he had an unhealthy business relationship with Jeff Lowe. They were both trying to use each other for their own means. From the legal standpoint, if you want to argue it, that on top, what they show in episode 7 is there's this one other big cat sort of wildlife refuge guy in the mix named Tim Stark. And Tim Stark is up because he kind of got reeled in. I'm sure the feds were talking to him because he had connections with Joe Exotic buying tigers and stuff like that. He and Jeff Lowe got into communication with each other and wound up going, well, let's just you and I do this. Let's just you and I do the business relationship thing. And lo and behold, we got two macho, egotistical, narcissistic guys going, you know what? Forget Joe Exotic. Let him burn. You and I will figure this out. We'll work together, 50-50 partners, and we'll sort it out. And how did that work out?
It did not work out for either one of them.
What? My shock.
I think it was because they both have that alpha male personality. Mm-hmm. They portrayed Jeff as somebody, you will work for me, you will do what I tell you to do at all means. And I think after a while, Tim started to see, yeah, maybe they are right about Jeff. He's using me, he's using my equipment. I'm the only one that's moving dirt around for this big elaborate zoo because I'm cheap labor.
Yeah.
And I think Tim started to realize, wait a minute, he's just using me. We're not going to be business partners in this. He wants me to do everything while he stands back and he does nothing. Jeff barked the orders, Tim moved, and after a while, Tim's just like, nope, I'm packing my stuff up and I'm leaving. I'm not going to be part of this anymore. And I think that's where that relationship started to go sour with those two. And they just said, you know what? You do you, I do, and I'll do me.
Yeah. And again, it's getting back to the idea of the connection, the relationship. I know from a male standpoint, we talked about unhealthy masculinity. Obviously, this is an aspect of that too. But women are just as capable of kind of alpha-ing each other out and getting into that whole cutthroat thing. But you see a lot in the definition, I think a lot of times of masculinity, that the idea is you win, you got to get whatever you can, you got to defeat the other person. And it's really difficult if you have that to get into a fair relationship or a fair partnership. And what I think Tim really felt was, I'm the laborer, I'll do all the work and I'll make all this big fat cash. you know, Jeff will invest this money and I'll make some of that big fat cash too. He even alluded earlier, that's what he wanted. He wanted the cash, he wanted the women, he wanted all of the allure that Jeff portrayed and projected. And he said the same thing Joe winds up saying once, you know, the hammer starts falling on Joe. It was all an illusion. None of the money was real. Nothing was true. There's a point in episode 7 where, in another display of the whole alpha male attitude, we find out that Jeff Lowe and his wife are expecting a child. And he jokes that she's going to need help, so I got her a nanny, and he holds up a photo of like this Uber model that Jeff has chosen to be the nanny. Now, I'm not saying that beautiful people can't be nannies. What I'm telling you is the truth of the matter is that picture he holds up, that person is, it's not. It's someone that he saw, and he decided, he'd been like talking to her through the wife or whatever. He's like, oh, this will look good for the documentary and everything. To check it out, guys. I got got my wife pregnant, a hot wife pregnant. I got the cute nanny. Look at me. And it turns out she's not a nanny. She's never done any nannying or anything like that. It was all set up for the purpose of the documentary and all that. But one of the things that really disturbed me, getting to the unhealthy masculinity, and this is something I noticed the second time I was talking with my wife about it, because my wife was like, there's Jeff is off. Now, there's a lot of creepy things, but it's the fact that, think what you want about Carole Baskin, think of what you want about Doc Antle, think about what you want about Joe Exotic. Whenever they're with someone that's supposed to be a partner or a friend of theirs or an associate, or they're in a relationship with, if they're shot side by side, they're looking straight at the camera, Carole always looks at her husband when her husband is talking. He looks at her. Joe looks at John and Travis and all that. Jeff never once looks at his wife when she's talking. He is looking away, almost like, I'll wait till you're done. And he just fiddles with his fingers, and like he can't even be bothered to acknowledge and look at her while she's talking about what's going on. He's looking at the camera because I think he can't get over it's me. Yeah, she's talking, but she's talking about me. So let me look at the camera. This is what it's about. Not you, not her, me.
I think that comes from the mentality of having an open relationship where he doesn't respect women. He just kind of uses them as tools in a sense, you know, because if you remember earlier, they talked about how him and his wife Lauren they would be in Vegas and they would have multiple women come up to the hotel room and they would have cats up there and, you know, all this sexual partying and so forth. So does he really have respect for women?
Mm-hmm.
I really don't think he does, and that's probably why he treats his wife like that. You know, it's all about your body language on how you treat somebody and when you're in a relationship with them.
And getting back to that again, you know, multiple and open relationships, they're tricky. Not to say that they can't work or whatever. All is any relationship, there has to be equality. There has to be fairness, and there has to be a mutual understanding. And what we saw before with Joe and Travis and John was him attempting to control both of those gentlemen in the sense that he didn't want them leaving the compound, the site, the zoo, whatever you want to call it. He didn't kind of interacting with other people and things like that. As a matter of fact, when he finds out that that John was in a relationship with the female cashier, one of the female clerks at the store there, and John, I think, winds up actually having a child with her. The way Joe describes it is, I can't compete with that. If it was another man, fine, you know, we can go to compete. I can't compete with that because, again, it's competition. And I just, regardless of how many women Jeff want to be in a relationship with, I can promise you, I can almost guarantee you, he's not allowed to be with another man.
Right.
And you know, Joe Joe was able to bring Travis in or Dylan or whoever in, if John had met another guy and was like, hey, how about if Joe didn't want it, it wasn't going to happen. And this is what you see in these situations too, where you have maybe not necessarily an open relationship, but an understanding that we're not going to have like the jealousy thing. If something, quote, if something happens, it happens, but is that really fair and mutual, or are you just getting all the benefits you can in it? If it's the other way around, you're going to have a problem with it. And I see that a lot of times in the masculinity. You know, I look at the way Jeff is treating his wife and all the other women that come into his life, and I'm pretty sure they show in the documentary or allude to the fact that he's going to have a daughter. Now, do you think he's going to be okay with his daughter being treated by a man the way that he treats his daughter's mother?
Right.
No.
That's,
you know, unfortunately, that's why I see a lot of unhealthy masculinity. They got no problem, you know, being Joe Cool and being all sexy with the ladies and working their game. If they have a daughter, they're on the porch with the shotgun.
Right.
Pull the guy away, because unfortunately, the sick truth of it is they know how bad guys can be sometimes, because guess what? They've done it too.
Right.
But that's not to say all men are bad.
No, it doesn't. And it made me think for a minute there. You know, what kind of new generation of kids are we raising?
Well, hopefully they're not taking Jeff Lowe as a guideline of what.
Yeah, absolutely.
I will be, and just to be fair and to be safe and full disclosure, you know, I've mentioned before about healthy masculinity. I've talked with some people that have listened to my podcast and everything like that. I've had many guys that I've talked to that listen to our podcast that was like, dude, this is Jeff Lowe and the way he acts. This is what we're fighting against. This is what we got to bring down, because he's the reason why we can't talk about masculinity and healthy masculinity, because everybody thinks that that's what masculinity means, and it's not.
Right.
But I found it interesting that when it got to the trial, that you really saw, again, talking about the relationships and things, you saw that his coworkers, Joe Exotic's employees, I should say, were really torn about their feelings and what to do, and it can be tough sometimes. A lot of times, when you realize how unhealthy a relationship is, it can be tough to do the right thing. And I just want your kind of opinion on that as we sort of wrap up.
Well, I think for John Rinke and Eric and even Saf, they were very committed to the zoo.
Oop. And yep, okay. Yeah, so that was the first time ever now. We almost made it through. Darn it, we were so close. Like 10 minutes left and we would have been out of the woods, but we actually lost a little bit of the internet here in our connection, but we are back. So yeah, going back to what we were saying before, Leslie, talk about how you felt the employees that Joe had felt about their jobs.
His employees were committed. They were committed to the zoo. They were committed to the animals. And I think at first, when they first started working at the zoo, they were committed to Joe. Things started to change for Joe. And that's when they lost all respect for him. If you saw the interviews with Eric, Eric's his own individual there, and he's a very open person. He knew that his commitment was to the animals. You know, he made open statements that Joe would go out in the zoo and kill tigers. You know, so there was that disrespect there of an employee-employer relationship.
Mm-hmm.
I think for John Rinke, felt compassion, and I don't think he really expected Joe to get a lot of time out of what was going on. And then when they sentenced him for 20 plus years, that really upset John. And he even said, with all the drama that was going on at the zoo, it ruined his relationships with his family and his wife, and he
Yeah.
had to move on, you know. And it just shows that, you know, sometimes it's best to just walk away from things and to get rid of that stress, that chaos in your life.
Yeah, and I think, again, just kind of bringing it back around to within the relationship or with outside as a bystander. Someone, the one gentleman there, Rinky, he winds up, yeah, you know, everything took a toll, and he divorced his wife. And so, you know, we as bystanders, we never met the wife or whatever, but that was somebody that was clearly affected by the unhealthy relationship that was going on in the zoo, the unhealthy dynamics in the business and everything like that. Saf, he mentions no one is, you know, there were no winners here. The Tigers lost. Absolutely. Like, there was no focus on the Tigers and what should have happened. And I think a lot of times you can have that as a friend in a relationship, or as a bystander in a situation, is when you start seeing unhealthy relationships, that can affect you too. And it can be really tough to be that friend or to be that person for somebody when you know something unhealthy is going on for them, and you see them. It's almost like the train is coming and they can't get out of their own way. They've trained up, they've set up the tracks, and it's coming for them, and they're not going to get out of their way. They can't get out of their own way no matter what you say or you do. And it can be really tough to have to make that decision to go, you know what, I'm going to get hit too. Like, I'm going to want to get hit by this. I'm going to get hurt by this as well, unless I get away. And it could be called stepping away, you know, looking the other way, walking away. What do we call it? We call it tough love sometimes. It's really, really tough. And as tough as it can be, though, if there's any consolation we can give anybody, is that it's also not rare. It is common that these things happen, and you're not alone if you've been in the situation where you've had to put up some distance. You know, we're talking about social distancing and everything now, but emotional or you know, relationship distance with somebody when you know they're making unhealthy decisions, and it's going to affect you too.
Right. And, you know, a lot of times people that experience so much chaos and drama and, you know, negativity in their life, they're their own worst enemies sometimes. You see that with Joe as you go through the documentary. Is he's his own worst enemy. He makes problems for himself.
And it's a byproduct. It's you know, some people, maybe they get successful being narcissistic or only worrying about themselves or only thinking about themselves. But one of the most common negatives and downfalls of only thinking about things from your point of view is you're going to make decisions based on you, and it's just going to go down that hole, and you might wind up being your own worst enemy. And he certainly does that. He makes bad decision after bad decision after bad decision. He starts bringing down the people around him, family, his friends, job, his employees, because of one thing that he's focused and obsessed with. That is the only thing.
And that's Carole.
And that's absolutely Carole Baskin. And he can't get out of his own way so much that during the trial, I knew his goose was cooked. I mean, before I had seen the documentary, I knew he was found guilty. But from a legal standpoint, with a legal background, I was wondering, well, how did they come about that? And there's one thing that they say in that trial, and as soon as I heard it, I knew it was done. You don't ever take the stand in your own defense unless it's absolutely a lost cause. You don't ever. They always say, well, will the defendant take the stand? Well, they don't. That's what your lawyer's there for. That's what your attorney is there for. It's innocent until proven guilty. The state has to show that you did anything. But some people, And I could give you a litany of them. Famous people, criminals, offenders, whatever you want to call them. Once they got up on the stand, and the attorneys will tell you, I was not surprised. The woman, he did not. His attorneys were saying, "Don't do it, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it." Of course, because it's not your story to tell. It's not you are there because someone is accusing you of something. It's their story to say, here's what we said you did, this, and this. Don't take the stand. Don't. If someone takes the stand, it's gonna be bad news. And sure enough, it was bad news.
And you, of all people, you would know that with your background in education and so forth, things that you've done in the past. So
yeah,
would know to pick up on that.
Yeah, it really is the last ditch effort, because once you're on the stand, once the defendant is on the stand and talks, the other side gets to ask you questions based on whatever you said. You can be cross-examined. There is no cross-examining of the defendant during the trial. That's what all the evidence is for, if the defendant doesn't say anything. But sure enough, he got up there, and actually, as just a little side note as we're wrapping up here again, one of the other things I wanted to mention to people is you are in a relationship with the documentarian. And you may not have gotten the whole story, because I can tell you, I've made judgments. I've made decisions on people, unhealthy relationships, person A or person B. I've made decisions about them. I've had thoughts about them. A month, a week, a year down the line, I come to find out, man, was I wrong. I made my decisions based on what I was being told by the person I knew in a relationship, and that wasn't the full truth. Excuse me. Anyway, one of the things that had come out after this has all been said and done, all these people that are involved in the documentary have come out and basically said, it wasn't right. You missed things. This isn't the truth. You kind of fabricated things. You played it up for a good story and whatever. And one of those people was one of the jury members in Joe Exotic's trial. And to show you how little information you ultimately wound up getting, Joe tried to hire two people to kill Carole Baskin. He hires Alan Glenn, who we talked about. He's the gentleman that takes the money and decides, I'm not going to do it, and flees back home. And he's the one with Jeff Lowe. And when you watch the documentary, you think, okay, this is why Joe is getting arrested. This is why he's being put on trial. This is why he's facing jail time, is because Jeff and Alan said, kill Carole, give him money, give Alan money, and go and kill Carole for you. And then Alan decided not to do it, and the feds arrested him and punished him anyway. No, apparently Joe approached another person, and they had him on tape. The jurors were able to hear Joe on tape go, well, the first person I tried to hire to kill Baskin took my money and ran away, so I'm going to do it right this time. Sorry, that's it. You're done. And Joe,
that's where they got him at.
Yeah.
I think they tried to get him with Alan, but Alan didn't follow through with it.
Yeah. And
chickened out and just ran out of town.
Yeah, and the juror, retelling about what had happened, basically said, well, we got into that a little bit, not as much as the documentary did. But we heard the other tape, which you never even had in the documentary, so we know he tried to do this twice. So he really didn't, he wasn't really set up as much as he couldn't get out of his own way, if you want to look at it like that. The overwhelming majority of what they talked about in the trial was what he had done to the cats, the punishments, the killings they had done to the cats, the unhealthy treatment and abuse that he had done to the tigers and the cats and the animals. And those are the multitude of charges that he faced. He faced a couple for the whole Carole Baskin thing. Everything else was about the animals. And
right.
Almost like apparently what I can read, looking at what happened was, it was almost like he was telling his attorneys, quit worrying about all of these other things. I got set up trying to kill Carole. This is what we need to focus on. And he just took everything into his own perspective and didn't recognize and couldn't see what was going on around him, which was he was basically not denying at all what he was actually on trial for.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where you see when people, it's like when we talked before about getting caught in a lie, that you start admitting as much as you think you need to admit to get yourself out of trouble still. Oh yeah, I did that, but that's not lo and behold, he was admitting, like, he's like, yeah, I killed cats. Yeah, I had to euthanize them when they were sick. Yeah, I took them out back and shot them, but I didn't. And it was like, you just admitted
Yeah.
exactly what
Yeah,
the issue at hand.
exactly. And I don't think Joe really paid attention to what the words were coming out of his mouth. I think he just spoke. He had no filter.
Yeah. One of the things the juror said was he couldn't even fake cry right.
Mm-hmm.
And he got up there, they knew he was going to obviously try to tell his story and he was going to basically put on a show and act. But when the moments came when he was supposed to show emotion and cry, he couldn't do it. And that's something that I was just speaking to somebody recently that was like talking about when they knew they were kind of in a bit of an unhealthy relationship, was it was like a person didn't know when to laugh. They knew something was supposed to be funny, but they could smile and fake smile, but they couldn't fake laugh. And that's a very common thing with people that have sometimes, emotional misunderstandings or unhealthy understandings of emotions, is they don't laugh right, and they certainly can't cry when something is, I mean, I have no doubt Joe cries. Something upsets and really hurts him painfully, he'll cry. But as far as what he was doing to those cats, that was what he had to do. So it didn't upset him at all. No.
Right. He desensitized himself from that whole situation.
Yeah. And so that's where he sits now for the next 20 some years, unless I know there's some talk that the president might think about pardoning him. I don't know about that. I think Joe maybe had one day where he could have possibly got a pardon, and then 24 hours later, there was enough after the fact and the reality of what Joe really did and said that I think that happened. But
I don't think the story's at its end. I think there's more to come later on. We'll see it in a continued documentary on Netflix. It's hard to say.
Yeah. Well, nothing's really over in any situation. All you can ever hope is that if something's unhealthy, you end that and learn from it and move on.
If Joe gets a retrial, or gets gets his day in court again, it's curious how it's all going to come out.
Well, I mean, it would be tricky. We could get into the whole legal things and the issues of if he could get a retrial or not. It would really have to boil down to an actual, like, the court actually procedurally did something wrong. That's right. Tricky, especially when you get into like big federal cases like this, because they'll spend a good year making sure they have everything lined up before they even set foot in court. But that's a story for another time. But if it happens, hey, I'll be right here with you, and we'll go over again. But any final thoughts you want to leave everybody with as we put a bow on this thing?
Yeah, on the very end of episode 7, Joe's talking about the chimpanzees being in the cages and stuff, and to me that was very compassionate in a sense, because he is letting go of those animals, and he even said that he felt bad keeping them in cages for 10 years, and he takes them out to a different sanctuary and they hug each other. First time in 10 years, instead of looking at each other through bars next to each other. And with everything that everybody's going through right now through this pandemic, that just kind of shows that we as humans, we also need that interaction with people.
Mm-hmm.
These chimpanzees are very human-like behaviors, and we can, that little piece at the end, we can take a lot of compassion for animals in that sense.
And that's why it's so, especially in this day and age, in the situation we're in, it's so important that we make sure that we're doing what we can in whatever relationships we have to make sure that they're healthy and fair and equal for us. We knew all of us working at the CVC when these shutdowns, these quarantines, these containments were going to start happening, that we saw a lot of articles. If there's any good it was at least there was some information getting out there that, like, if you're in an unhealthy and God relationship, being stuck at home it's a jail sentence for
Yeah.
a lot of people. And you just hope that they find some ways to find healthy relationships, either through communications, through Zooms or whatever, to get to where they need to be so that they can get the treatment and the help that they can. And we are still, our phone number is there, 455-9414. We are there to help people if they feel they're in a situation where they're being victimized in a relationship and they need help. You can get help. And I would hope that, if there's anything that can come out of this, we understand as people how important having healthy relationships are, and not trying to still hold on to maybe that one or two good things that are still in the relationship, but seeing it fully for what it is and assessing it from that point of view is really, I think, important.
Absolutely.
Well, I want to thank you so much for everything. This was phenomenal. And like I said, something else comes down the line or whatever, I know we're going to be looking into doing some more things social media wise for the season. I just want to thank everybody who's been listening and following along. I especially want to thank you, Leslie. This has been really wonderful to do. So,
yeah, and thank you too, Brian. It's been fun just kind of sitting down and, talking about these different things. And I hope we had helped somebody through our videos, podcasts. It's been fun. It's been different. I never did anything like this before. So it's been fun to look forward to every week to do this with you.
Well, I say you did awesome. So there it is.
Okay.
There you go. So, all right. Well, thank you again. And we just hope everybody stay healthy, stay safe, stay well. And thank you all.
Thanks. See ya.